Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Invest Power series today. RBA has just announced another rate cut. We are at a historical low of cash rate with 1% at the moment, which means, since June, there has been 2 consecutive drops. And, that's going to give a bit of reductions in terms of interest rate for all the homeowners, which is great news. But unfortunately, on our economic front, it's probably not so good. It shows that they need to do that in order to stimulate the economy and also the wage growth a little bit more. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, and I'll cover that a little bit in our SYF podcast with Jazz. So I won't touch it again today. But what I do want to quickly touch on today is in relation to purchasing property with family or friends. I've had a couple of inquiries recently because people are trying to get back into the market due to the sentiment now that they're asking me whether it's a good idea to actually purchase property together with your friends or families. So my personal view on this is that it's probably not a wise move, and there's a couple of reasons. First thing is, if you purchase the property together, whether it's going to be an investment property or own-occupied property, each and every one of you has got different plans and you're at different stage of life. So let's say, for example, I purchased an investment property along with my brother. And that was intending, our initial agreement might be that we want to keep it for 5 to 10 years. Now, things may have changed, 5 years down the track, where my brother may have got a girlfriend, they're married, they want to actually move into a home. And because of the fact that we jointly own that investment property, his serviceability or his borrowing capacity could very well likely be impacted on that. So if he wants to buy a home at that time, he may have to sell the investment property in order to free up some of the borrowing capacity to buy the dream home that he and his wife wants. So that could be a bit of issue because, depending on where that property is located, you may not have that much growth in 5 years, keeping in mind that property investment is a long-term strategy. So if you don't have enough growth and consider the transaction costs, the selling costs, the stamp duty that you pay initially, they're not small cost to factor in. So if the property hasn't grown that much and, at that point in time, he wants to sell, I don't want to sell, because if we sell, then we're not going to realize any profits, then that's where the issue arises and things start to get nasty. So just keeping in mind that before you enter into some sort of joint agreement into purchasing property together, make sure that factor in that whatever your future plan is. And I have to admit, it's usually impossible because we don't even know what's going to happen in 5 years' time. So let alone try to plan what will happen in the future at this point, which is why I personally would avoid having to go into that kind of agreement. Okay, so that's just... Also, if I put my mortgage broker hat on, in most cases, if you co-own or as part of the loan applicants for property, let's just say, for example, I own 20% of a property and I need to cover that 20% of the loan. But essentially, when I get assessed on my borrowing capacity, some banks will actually take 100% of the loan commitment. So in other words, if I take out a loan of $500,000 along with my family to purchase a friend, realistically, I only own 20%. So people will think that logically, I only need to recover, or I only need to repay the 20%, which is, only need to cover for the $100,000, right? Well, that's not how banks calculate it. Most banks will still have to take it as an existing commitment for the full liability. In other words, when banks treat my serviceability assessment, they will have to use me for the repayment of $500,000 loan amount. And that's when people get caught out and get really upset and go, well, it doesn't make sense. I'm only eligible for 20%. Why do I have to be assessed on a 100% level? Now, there could be ways to go around it. There's something called common debt reducer, which some banks do apply. And as long as you can show that the other applicants can actually afford their part of repayment, then you can, at that point in time, you can be assessed just on your portion of your repayment. So it's not the end of the world, but common debt reducer usually goes into very much detail about verifying what the other applicants are also, whether they're also capable of afford to repay their own portions. So, and that could be a very long and tedious process. If you are in dire need to get a quick finance approval and you're stuck in this kind of position, then don't expect there will be a quick solution. That's all I'm saying. So tread carefully, think carefully before entering into any kind of joint agreements in purchasing property with friends and families. So just keeping in mind that, if you are going to purchase property together with your family members or friends, then there could be implications down the track in terms of your plan and their plans. Okay, so it's still doable, and I'm not saying completely impossible, but I'm just saying there could be a lot more implications and considerations that you guys, as in you and the person or the people that want to purchase or enter the contract into at the same time, need to have a bit further discussions and considerations in terms of if kind of scenario. So, if you need to sell this at this point in time, say 3 to 5 years down the track, then can we reach an agreement at that time? If worse comes to worse, we have to sell a loss. Are all the key stakeholders, in other words, all the owners, are happy to be able to sell at a loss, which I don't think anyone would agree on. So, if these kind of critical questions are being thrown onto the table and, lay it out up front, then I think most of the time, if all the stakeholders are on the same page, then you will be able to reach an agreement and go ahead on that basis. But chances are, most of the time, things will get wrong and things will get really nasty. And then, just like in the example that I've given, if, for example, I will need to sell that property in the loss just in order to free up my brother's serviceability, then, that could potentially damage the relationship between us as siblings, and also not to mention the financial loss that could have incurred on both of us. So think carefully and consider and tread carefully with these kind of agreements in terms of purchasing property with your parents, family, friends, etc. Okay? If you like this video, don't forget to like it and comment below. There's heaps of videos that I've done since the start of this YouTube channel. So, feel free to check out all the other things. I'm sure that all the videos will be able to help you in terms of making your investment journey easier. If you got any questions, feel free to contact me. Otherwise, I will see you again in next week's Invest Power episode.